Higgs, founder of Milbank Group, ecstatic dancer, and recovering workaholic. It's time to find out a little bit more about your journey, how you became the man, the myth, the legend we have sitting here in front of us. Welcome. What were you like as a kid?
As a kid, I was, well, at school, I was probably a little bit naughty, didn't pay attention, and I wasn't that happy as a kid, to be quite honest.
Well, tell me about growing up then as an unhappy kid.
Okay, so I grew up in West London. So my mum and dad were old school, sort of working class. We grew up in a council house. I was adopted actually. So I had mad ginger hair, national health glasses, patch on one eye. So I used to get a lot of shit at school as well. And the whole story around being told I was adopted and stuff like that. So from a very young age, I actually thought, well, there's obviously something wrong with me, right? So I basically grew up with some quite unhelpful negative beliefs, and got a bit of shit because of ginger hair and all the rest of it. So I wasn't very happy as a kid, to be quite honest. And also I more recently discovered, very recently actually, within probably this year, that I've got ADD, which in hindsight actually explains a lot as well in terms of why I messed around at school, why I couldn't really pay attention and things like that,
And do you think looking back that has helped or hindered you being ADD?
It's helped. It's definitely helped. So this is the thing, and I've got to say, and like until about a year ago, maybe even less than that, when I found out, I didn't even think it was a real thing. It gets talked about a lot now. Maybe it's just because it's now on my radar because I'm aware of it for myself. I'm seeing it popping up all over the place. Yeah, I used to think it was a whole load of rubbish. Wasn't even a real thing. Now, of course, I know it is a very, very real thing, and I, basically comes from traumatic things, particularly childhood. And interestingly, there's a massive correlation between adoption and ADD and ADHD. So it's an excellent book called Scattered Minds by a bloke called Gabor Mate. Everyone should read it, listen to his stuff. The bloke's an absolute genius. So anyway, now I know quite a lot about it, and it has helped actually. So whilst a lot of stuff was difficult, particularly when I was younger, but where it really helps is for people, like, if and when you can find your thing or something that you're into, you do become super focused. Yeah. So when I eventually discovered what my thing was, or something that I really liked, which ended up being property development, I was super focused, and always have been actually. And when it comes to property development, there's a lot to do. There's a lot to know. I think being really detailed is a really big part of it. And the ADD actually all sort of tied into that nicely.
And as a young man, when you left school, how did you get into the building trade? What did you used to do?
Yeah. So, like I say, another interesting thing with ADD, now if you don't like something, you just cannot do it. I mean, it's not like you're just being awkward, and it's really interesting. So I know this now. So I've got young kids. I've got 11-year-old twins. They've both got it a bit, but now of course I know quite a lot about it. So I can help them, and hopefully things will be nowhere near as difficult for them as it was for me. But the bottom line is, if you're not into something, no one can make you do it. I mean, you just literally can't focus. It's just the way the brain's wired. Yeah. So I was like that with a lot of stuff at school. So as a result, I didn't really. But the only thing I really liked was art, actually. So I didn't do any exams. I left school with no qualifications. Where I grew up was a sort of typical London place, little bit rough. Most people, or certainly the people I sort of hung around with and knew, were into slightly naughty stuff. I sort of got into that stuff as well when I was very, very young. Very nearly went to prison because of some stuff I was involved in. Luckily enough, I didn't. But that was a real massive wake-up call for me. But things could very have easily gone in my whole life in a totally different direction if I had gone to prison. Obviously, like lots of people do, you know. So luckily enough, that didn't happen to me. So I decided to, see if I could find a sensible way to do things. Now, you know, when I was young, I was always very, very driven by money because I wasn't happy, because we were sort of relatively poor, really. I equated the two things and thought, well, it must be because we haven't got any money. If I'm just go and make a load of money, I'm going to be all of a sudden happy. Yeah, so that made me very sort of driven to make money when I was younger. So I then, at the time, I was working on building sites. So remember, left school with no qualifications, but I was always a grafter and I wanted to work. I wanted to earn money, and I've always worked very, very hard. So ended up working on building sites. In fact, my first job was basically cleaning the bogs on the building site. Yeah, so like it's literally lowest of the low. But I was getting on with it, no complaints, really hard worker. So very soon I got promoted to digging holes on building sites. And I was always asking questions. So this is when I was like straight out of school, 16. I was always asking questions. I was super interested. The site managers and my bosses obviously could see that, and they were sort of, wanted to encourage me. So they sort of gave me more to do and things like that. And now one day, and this was the sort of key thing that put me onto property development. I was on site, down the hole. I remember it was winter. It was actually sleeting. It was freezing cold. Couple of Range Rovers. This is like 40 years ago. Couple of Range Rovers pulled in the gates. Guys get out, flash suits, put their hard hats on. All my bosses sort of run over to the car, umbrellas out, sort of walking around the site. And I remember thinking like, wow, man, that looks good. Those guys are obviously the Mr. Bigs. Fuck me, that's what I want to do, right? And of course they were the property developers. Now, then I had no idea what it was all about. I thought, well, okay, to be a property developer, you obviously need to know all about building stuff. You know, here we are on the building site, now having a look around, it's obviously all about building stuff. Right, that's what I'm going to do. So straight away, I decided to see if I could wangle myself a job with the site engineers, so that the guys setting out where everything needed to go. Yeah, so I got myself a job. The firm said, no problem. My job was then helping the site engineers. Now, the person that helped the site engineer is called a chain person, typically a chain boy. Yeah, which is not quite as weird or kinky as it sounds, right? Chain boy is a historic thing. A chain's actually a unit of measurement. So years and years ago, you know, when you were setting out roads, they used to carry the chains. It was basically the lackeys, the donkey work, doing that. So that's a chain boy. Nowadays, it's a person that holds the other end of the tape measure, bangs the pegs in, all of that sort of stuff. So that's the job I got. Then, of course, so I'm working with the engineer. I'm asking questions all the time. I'm really super interested. And eventually, after not very long, the guy says to me, look, obviously you're really interested. You're really keen. Do you want to go to college? I said, yeah, fantastic. So I basically went to study college part-time to study construction management. Yeah, but remember, this was all with a view to becoming a property developer, because that's what I decided I wanted to do. So I did that. Bought a first house, a bit of an old wreck, with a mate of mine when we were 17. Bought a house. He was a bricklayer. In fact, funny enough, at night school we went to sort of like bricklaying college together. Remember, I'm super driven now. I know exactly what I want to do. I'm construction management training once a week, getting sent to college. The rest of the day rest of the week I'm on site helping the site engineer. In a couple of evenings a week we used to go to night school with a mate of mine, training, doing brick work. He was good, I was terrible. So he actually ended up becoming a bricklayer. Obviously I didn't, luckily enough actually, or I suppose who knows what would have happened if I was any good. And that was it. So we bought a house together where we were 17. then did it up evenings and weekends, like so, super small scale property development. Yeah, so that's how it started, and then slowly over the years, we bought another one, started getting a little bit more adventurous, bought a house and split it into flats. This was all sort of evenings and weekends while I'm studying to be a site engineer eventually, actually. So I eventually became a site engineer, then a trainee site manager, and then a site manager on small sites. So by the time I was like 21, I was actually managing little, very small, construction projects for people. So that was it. And whilst evenings and weekends doing increasingly sort of bigger development deals. Just a quick word to say thank you to our sponsors, Land Tech, creators of Land Insight, which is the industry-leading bit of software to help developers find and analyse the potential of real 100% off-market development opportunities. I've been involved in the business for over 10 years now, and if you don't know what it basically does what people like me used to have to do the old-fashioned way, which is hunt around and get together all of the key information that's needed in order to make sensible decisions on the development potential of land. So that's planning data, market research, lists of all of the various constraints, environment and agency information, you name it, massive long list of all of the stuff that you need in order to find out who owns land, what policy constraints there might be, and exactly what you may or may not be able to do with it. All of the industry leading developers use it, and also the most clued up smaller ones. So if you're not already using it and you want to trial for yourself, have a look in the show notes. You'll find a link to get a free trial, test it for yourself, see what you think, and hopefully get busy finding real off-market development opportunities. So thanks again to our show sponsors, Land Tech, and let's get back to the show.
And what kind of companies did you work for during the time you weren't doing your own properties?
Yeah, so what happened? So now, this is like the early to mid and late 80s. So there was a bit of a construction boom going on, which was handy. So I ended up for quite a long time, I was a freelance site engineer. So I would go to a lot of different sites, setting stuff out, making sure everything was in the right place and managing things. So I did a lot of big groundworks. I worked for Lang Construction, GP Trentham. They went bankrupt in the 90s, was the firm I did all my training with. There was a crowd called Ashford Construction that eventually got taken over by a crowd called Kings Park, that then eventually became Prologis, that some people will know about, probably one of the biggest distribution and logistics developer in the country now. So I worked for actually a lot of little different people on the construction side. So again, that was really good knowledge and experience, because whilst I later discovered, remember I got into that because I wanted to be a property developer, and I thought that I had to understand construction inside out in order to be a property developer. It was only as time went on and I learned more and more and more. I eventually, basically, it's like everything in life. Most of us, we don't know what we don't know. And it was the same for me in construction and development, and it's the same for lots of people in development, depending on what stage they're at. I eventually came to realise it's like shit. You need to know a lot more about just construction in order to be a property developer. In fact, I actually realised what it really is all about is land and planning. That's the key to successful property development. So I eventually came to realise that, and that's when I started learning more about that and sort of made that my main focus. And when did you make that switch from construction to planning? Yeah. So I'll tell what happened, right? So remember, I'm doing increasingly bigger deals, evenings and weekends, and now when I'm freelance, I can work sort of when I want. I can go to a project and do a week or 2 weeks, or there was massive imbalance supply and demand. Site engineers, that they were really in demand, so I could go and get a job anywhere. So I'll work when I needed to. In between, I'd work on one of our development projects. Yeah. So what happened at the time? So me and my mate, we were buying things in the auction, and now auctions 35, 40 years ago were very different places to they are today. In auctions, not a lot of people knew about them. This is before Homes Under the Hammer existed. Yeah, so they're usually dark, smoky rooms, usually basements of hotels. Not a lot of people there. You know, you did used to get a lot of deals, right? Now it's very, very different. So we were buying things in the auction and we were buying things from estate agents, right? But of course, those things are both on. Everything in those scenarios are things that are on or in the market. But every now and then, in a little patch where we were sort of doing our stuff, which was still all around West London, where I grew up, there'd be like a couple of houses or a block of flats springing up that had been nowhere near an auction, nowhere near an estate agent, because we would have seen them, right? And it was a shock. So I'm like, wow, how did I miss that? All of a sudden, you've got people nicking deals in my patch, yeah? So I sort of started looking into that and investigating that a little bit more. And basically, you know, what that was they were off-market deals. So I started becoming aware of like you didn't have to just buy things from estate agents and auctions and stuff like that. There's other ways of finding and digging out deals. Basically what you do, and this is linked to planning now, of course, so which I started discovering at the same time. So, you know, I started learning more about planning. So then, of course, when you've got that knowledge, you can spot stuff that might have potential before the agent, the owner has even thought about it. So you used to spot this stuff, approach the owners directly, end up having a chat and a negotiation, then hopefully agreeing a deal to buy that bit of land or that building off market before it had been anywhere near an agent and got involved in any competition. Yeah. So that was a sort of real key eye opener. Discovering the whole concept of real off market deals and also the importance of adding planning value. Yeah. So that was a sort of bit of a game changer, really.
So how did you then migrate into the world of getting planning permission and sourcing the right, and which companies did you work for?
Well, that was it. So remember, so that was all. And remember, this was all over. This was like from like 17. I bought that first house with a mate of mine. By the time I started really realising this whole thing about planning and off market, I was probably like 19, 20, 21. And as time went on, I was sort of learning more and more, realising more and more, yeah? And two things happened. So I'm learning about the importance of off-market deals. I'm learning about the importance of adding planning value. But what also happened, which was a massive eye-opener, I discovered a book called Big Profits from Building Plots. Yeah, and what that used to be. So I was always like really driven, very entrepreneurial, always wanting to do deals, make money, you know, come up with ideas. Yeah, and in the sort of back of the Sunday papers, and also in the Evening Standard, actually, that used to have lots of all the site engineering jobs. Right now and then, you used to get these like little ads for all sorts of weird stuff. A lot of it was rubbish, you know, like money making schemes and stuff like that. But some stuff in there was quite good. One day I remember seeing this advert called Big Profits from Building Plots. I thought, wow, actually that sounds quite interesting. So anyway, so I sent off. You get this little book. It was only a little book, but basically what that was about was option agreements. Yeah. So, and which I knew nothing about. So the thing that sort of stopped me sort of growing too fast was the deals that we would do a deal, make some money, use that money to do the next deal. Yeah. Wait till we finish that one, use that money to do the next one. So we slowly sort of like recycling the profit into slightly bigger deals. Yeah. But anyway, I discovered this book about option agreements and all of a sudden realised that I can go and control land with a certain type of contract, even if I haven't got the money to buy it. So in those days, the stuff we were buying was probably, you know, 100, 200, 300, 400,000 pounds, which was, you know, a lot of money 35 years ago. It certainly was to us, yeah. But all of a sudden, I find this book that realised even something's like £1 million, and I've got nothing like £1 million, I can still actually do that deal or secure and control that deal by using an option agreement, yeah. And done the right way, you actually only need £1. It's a legal consideration. So that was a massive eye-opener. So what that allowed me all of a sudden is to do deals that were way, way bigger than I actually had the funds to do. Yeah. So that was massive. Now, again, of course, but I still didn't know how to do it really, because there was no training existed in those days. the only way, I didn't know anyone. It wasn't like, I didn't know a load of rich people or have a load of rich mates or anything like that, and people that were already doing this. So most of the stuff I learned, certainly in the first 5, 6, 7 years of my career, was all the stupid hard way, i.e. trial and error, right? Which is not a clever way to do it when it comes to property development, because it's too high risk, high reward. Anyway, so started doing slightly, increasingly better deals, more off market, more adding planning value, and then a few on option agreements if and when I was able to tie them up and do them. Yeah. So that was fantastic. And now interestingly, and then I did a nice little deal and built my first single new build house in 1988. Yeah, when I was 21. Up until then, most of the stuff had been refurbs and splitting houses into flats and things like that. So that was massive. But then, of course, as time carried on, the more I sort of learned, the more I realised how much I didn't know. Yeah. So I then started thinking, well, look, now I'm super serious about this stuff. I know there's no doubt I want to be a property developer. I realise it's all about land and planning. How do I make myself an expert in these things? So I eventually came to the conclusion that the only way I'm really going to hopefully make myself an expert in those things is to go away and get, lots of, it's all about experience at the end of the day, knowledge and experience, working with someone that had been there, seen it, done it, and was doing it on a big scale. So I decided that I needed to get a job with a big house builder. I then need to work out, okay, well, what would be the best job? Remember, I'm not doing this because I want to work for someone else. I'm just doing this to get the knowledge and experience that I've now realised that I need if I want to get good at this stuff, yeah? So I thought, well, okay, well, what would be the best job to get? I realised the best job to get would be a land buyer, actually doing deals, with other people's money. So I thought, well, okay, if I want to get myself a job as a land buyer, what do I need to know? What do I need to study? What do I need to learn? I nearly studied town planning. Decided correctly, even in hindsight, that actually that wouldn't have been the best thing, because whilst it's massively important, it's a little bit too narrow if you want to be a developer. So I actually studied land economics and became a chartered planning and development surveyor eventually. Because the thing with that is, it's not just planning, it's valuations, it's construction, it's all of the other, it's law, it's all of the other bits that you need to know about. So I studied land economics, 5 years, sort of like semi-part-time, while doing increasingly bigger deals, all with a view to get a job with a big house builder, which luckily I did. I targeted Lang Homes because they were renowned for having the best training in the industry. Luckily enough, I got a job with Lang Homes. Had a excellent teacher. My old boss was a bloke called Rob Munro, fairly infamous in the house building industry. If you've been around for a long time, you certainly back then you'd know him. So I had an excellent teacher, and so I worked for Lang Homes for 5 years. Got headhunted for Barratt's, the biggest developer in the country. Worked for them for 5 years. Eventually ended up as head of land for my division of Barratt London. And that was it, really. So until I eventually managed to escape, because remember, I only wanted to work for the house builders to get the knowledge and experience I needed. But I became a very good land buyer. And if you're a very good land buyer, you're literally worth your weight in gold, because any business, any property developer needs the right land. I'd realised that myself, which is why I decided I needed to learn to be a land buyer, really. So that's the key, really. So that was for probably the first 15, nearly 20 years of my career. I was learning it, I'm going to say.
And during that time, what do you think is the biggest industry myth out there, in your opinion?
Well, I don't know about industry myth. Well, so you've got, hopefully, well, within the industry, so let's say the house building and property development industry, you've got a whole range of people. You've got people that are massively experienced, and obviously Barratt's the biggest developer in the country, right? And then you've got people that are just starting out, obviously like I was when I was 17. So there's a big range of people within the industry. But the more experienced ones, they'll tell you what I'm telling you, which is it's all about land and planning. That is the key. Now, outside of the industry, and that's probably where the biggest myths are, which actually one of the reasons for I wanted to do this podcast called Inside Property Development, is so people in general and would understand how it really works. Because the biggest myth is that it's easy and that you all make fortunes. Yeah, and also that another big myth is that property developers are all greedy arseholes. Yeah, which of course there are, just like in every walk of life, there are people like that. But as there certainly don't need to be, and there are a lot of people that are do it the right way, and they just really want to create good quality spaces, buildings, housing in particular. And create good stuff. Because whilst it's brilliant, of course, we've all got to pay the bills and it's nice to make a load of money. The thing that actually makes you really happy and proud is creating good stuff at the same time. And there's a lot of people inside the industry that do that. So the biggest myth is that it's all like, get rich quick and easy money.
And so this sort of, what age do you think you were when you made the move away from working for a big company, and what did you end up doing? So in 2002, so what's that? 24 years ago now. It's basically when I set up Millbank Group. Like I say, I eventually managed to escape Barratt's. I'd spent 10 years working for the PLCs. I only really wanted the knowledge and experience. I didn't really want to, I don't really like what I'm doing. What I'm told. It's the ADD thing again, right? Taking orders and doing what other people tell you to do is not really my thing. I didn't really actually have to do that too much of that at either Lang's or Barratt's because, I was a really good land buyer. And as long as you're doing the deals and feeding the machine with land, within reason, you can sort of get away with what you like, really. I mean, I certainly did. I didn't really toe the line, but I was just out there, doing deals, and they were all good deals. So eventually, and I left. I resigned a number of times. Every time I resigned, I got pay rises and promotions and stuff like that. So basically, got me with the golden handcuffs and made it very difficult to leave. Until eventually, 2020. I said, look, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can say. In fact, you know what? I'll tell you the truth about the story. Actually, what was the final straw? Yeah. So we were. I tied up a really big deal. Yeah, like a really big deal, and the chairman of Barratt's had to sign it off. Yeah. So basically, I had to show him the site. Yeah. And I won't mention any names because I don't want to, get anyone a bad name. So anyway, so I had to go. I had to drive and meet the chairman, pick him up, and then drive him to this site when I'm going to show him around the site, talk him through the numbers, show him the development appraisal, and what's what. Yeah. So I picked him up. We're in the car. We're driving. And so this is not in my patch now. So I've now picked him up somewhere I don't really know the area, right? So as we were driving from like sort of like this other area to this site I was going to show him that was in my patch in West London, we're driving down the road, and up ahead you see a sign with Barratt flags. So you can see the colours, you can see all the branding. It's obviously a Barratt site coming up, right? So I've clocked it. He's obviously clocked it as well. Because remember, he's a chairman of Barratt's, right? We used to build, I think at the time it was like 15,000 units, and so he's all over the country, right? So he doesn't know every single site, right? So we spotted this Barratt site coming up. I've never seen it before. He's never seen it before. And as we're getting closer to close, we're obviously both sort of looking at it, sussing it out, and whatever. I was looking at it and thinking, actually, they've done a really nice job there. Now remember, 20 years ago, Barratt's house building actually in general was nowhere as it's different to it is nowadays, right? Barratt's weren't the best developer when I was there, right? They're actually good now. They weren't as good then. Yeah. So we're driving down the road, spot this site. As we get closer and closer, I'm thinking actually that's quite nice.
it was a conservation area, so they've it's quite a lot of attention to detail. Nice bricks, nice windows, nice tiles. It was obviously they'd had good architects on it. It was a nice scheme, right? So I'm looking at it thinking, oh, that's nice. They've done well there. So that's a nice scheme. And then my boss all of a sudden says, like, fuck. Well, he actually didn't, because he didn't swear. Actually, he said, oh, they've spent too much money on that, right? And anyway, and I thought about it, that really pissed me off. I'm gonna struggle not to say his name. Anyway, so I said, like, fucking hell, like, what are you on about? And he sort of looked at me. And bear in mind, this is the chairman, right? So top man. So and he was sort of like, what do you mean? I said, look, when people like that, you know, they've done a good job there. That looks, it's nice, right? The problem is, you know, when you like build cheap, you build shit, you create shit, the whole environment goes to shit. People start acting like shit, and everything goes to fucking shit, which it does, right? And his response was like, well, I don't see it like that. I see it as the bottom line. And I was like, fuck you now. And that was like the final straw. And I said to him, like, I said, well, I'll tell you what. He said, you know what? And I said, you can stick your job up your fucking arse. Yeah. So that's what I said. Now that was like half. It was sort of like half in jest, because I knew him, right? And obviously I knew I wasn't going to get the sack because I'm a good land boy, right? But it was sort of half serious as well, and that was really the final straw. So I thought about it for a while, and then a few weeks later I basically resigned again, as usual, whole load of promotions, offers, and all the rest of it. And then I said, look, there is nothing you can do, there is nothing you can say that would make me stay. Like, you know, I'm going off to do my own thing. Yeah. So that's what I did. So that was 2020 when I managed to escape. And even then, luckily enough, and then they said to me, they said, well, look, we don't really want you working for the competition. You know, if we pay you a retainer, will you just do a little bit of stuff for us if and when you want to? Give us first refusal on any sites that you might come up with. You know, and still do a little bit with us if and when you want to. Yeah, so I sort of said, yeah, of course, like, no problem, because I had which was great, right? So I had no intention for working for anyone else anyway, and of course that did keep me going. And they paid, so for the first few years, I got paid 25 grand a year retainer, basically not to work for the competition. So that was fantastic. That was quite handy for getting me started as well. And now and then a few big sites did come up, which were way too big. I could never have done them. And actually they were a bit sexy and exciting and interesting. So I still did a few deals for Barrett's for the first few years.
And so in between your experience as a land buyer and the early days developing properties with your friend, did you carry on the side developing properties? Not
when I was working for the house builders. So this is the thing, like I said, the whole, you know, I'm like super focused. So if I'm doing something, I'm like doing it 100%. So remember, so I'm doing small deals. So probably from, I can't even bother to work out the dates, but from like 17, I think I was 20, about 27, 28. Something like that when I first started working for the house builders. So up to then, all the time that I was studying, so before I started working for the PLCs, I was doing my own deals, increasingly bigger as I started learning what I was doing, and then I found out about option agreements. So I was building a few little small bits and pieces, and actually I was trading quite a lot. So I was finding sites off market, tying them up on option agreements, adding planning value, and then just selling them on. So that was what I was sort of doing for the first part of my career. The 10 years I was working for the PLCs, I was just buying land for them. I wasn't doing any of my own deals until I left. And then, of course, that's when it really kicked off, which was in 20... what did I say earlier? Did I say 2020? 2000. 2000. I don't think I did say 2020 earlier, did I? It was anyway. 2000 was when I left Barrett's. That's really when I started now doing my stuff on a much bigger scale, because of course I've spent 10 years getting the experience doing much bigger deals with really experienced people all around me all the time.
And then how did Millbank grow?
So I guess, well, I mean, that grew sensibly and slowly up until 2008. Now, again, anyone that was in the development industry in 2008 will tell you it was a bit of a car crash. So and now I'm actually, I'm as well as trading a lot of stuff, I'm building a lot of stuff. So 2008, I think I had 5 sites on the go, things that I was developing. 4 of them were funded by RBS, and 1 of them was funded by Close Brothers. Okay. Now remember, so these were all good deals because they were always following the model, my sort of standard model, which is 100% off market. Hopefully negotiate it and tie it up on sensible terms. So you're not paying too much money for it. You add maximum planning value. That makes it much easier to fund because you've created a load of value in the deal before you've even started. Sometimes I used to trade those things on, sell them to other developers. Sometimes I used to build them. 2008, I had 5 sites on the go. 4 with RBS, 1 with Close Brothers. Obviously, all of the banks, we had the global financial crisis. All of the banks run out of money, couldn't continue to fund stuff. They didn't have the money to keep funding stuff. So they started pulling the plug on deals. Now, interestingly, for my deals, because they had so much value in them, and I wasn't massively over leveraged, so it wasn't like I'd gone and borrowed like 90% plus or anything like that. These are all really lowly geared, around 60% and stuff like that. So they were super safe deals that had a lot of value in them. Because they had a lot of value in them, they were the first ones it was that the banks pulled the plug on, because they could then take them off of you, recoup their money. They didn't have to keep funding them anymore, and then they would just sell them. Point a load of specialists and stuff like that would basically take all the value out of the deal. So a lot of people got wiped out, particularly by RBS. Were diabolical how they treated people. A lot of businesses and developers went bust. I nearly did actually. I was sort of almost back to square one in 2008. So I had to sell everything that I'd built up over the previous years in order to pay back, keep contractors, consultants, stuff like that. So no one actually lost money other than me. But I literally sort of sold everything up, and I never went bust because no one sued me. I never went bankrupt. I never load anyone any money. But I very, very, very nearly did. Luckily, the one deal I had with Close Brothers, who are a real brilliant, old school, very reputable lender. There's a couple like that, but not that many. That one, they stuck with me. That one came right, made a few quid, and then sort of saved me, and I carried on after that.
Do you think that being a property developer has got harder or easier? Yeah,
it's got way harder. I mean, it's one of the reasons we've got a massive housing problem, right? So if you remember, I think I said that I built my first single, just one new build house in 1988. Yeah. Now, if you go away and you look at the statistics, 1988 was the peak of SME, smaller house builders. Yeah. And I think there were about 20. Was there 20? I think there were about 25,000. Yeah, smaller house builders that might build from one house a year to 100 houses a year. And historically, those house builders they were builders. They were builders and contractors that would find a site, get planning relatively easy, build some houses, sell some houses. That was it. That's how a lot of the industry worked. Planning started getting increasingly difficult. 1988, a whole load of new stuff came in that made it even more difficult, and since then, if last statistics I saw were 2017, when I think it had gone from 25,000 down to 3,000. Yeah, and that's like now it will be even less than that. Yeah, because it's got even harder. Now, obviously, I was right at the start of my career. Remember, 1988 was the peak. I was 21. I built my first single house. I couldn't give up. I just had to stick with it. It's all I knew, and so I sort of like learnt it and dealt with it through the ups and downs of the the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. But lots of the older developers, as it got more difficult, they just gave up. Yeah. Now it's actually worse than it's ever been. It's certainly in my 40 years. Yeah, it's more difficult than it's ever been. There's less SME house builders than there's ever been. Reinvigorating and building the SME house building and development industry, I think, is the biggest thing that needs to happen in order to solve the housing crisis. So that's something I'm massively into trying to help with. It's one of the reasons for starting to do this, and also the reason I started a separate training business 10 years ago.
And do you think that now that there's a new government in charge, they'll be able to, or you'll be able to help other people, drive through this green/grey belt development and however many million houses they want built?
Yeah. So obviously we've recently got a new Labour government. They are making all the right noises in terms of house building is just so important for the economy in general, in terms of all the people that get employed building houses, all of the materials that get supplied, everyone furnishing the houses, carpets, kitchens, TVs, everything. There's just so much economic growth that comes from house building, and of course people need places to live. It's important that it happens in the right way. So Labour have obviously identified that, making all the right sounds about getting more houses built. Various policies they've talked about, including the grey belt. It's all very new, so I don't really know exactly what that's going to be yet. But without a shadow of a doubt, it's a big conversation around grey belt and green belt and what should happen there. Absolutely, some of it does need to be released, because there's just no other way that you are going to get enough houses built. So the fact that Labour are sort of saying that they're going to do stuff, that's great. The important thing is, of course, that they do stuff, and importantly that they do the right things. Because part of the problem is, there are a few people like me, smaller house builders in the industry, and of course the big ones as well, that are talking about what needs to happen. And it historically hasn't always been listened to. So you get all sorts of think tanks and advisors and stuff coming up with these ideas. But you really, trust me, they need to be listening to the people that are actually at the coalface, dealing with all of the stuff that needs to be dealt with in order to actually get deals done and make things work.
And you've got quite a strong passion about the sustainability side of things and environment and the way houses today should be built.
Yeah.
Is this an opportunity to spread that message and try and persuade planners to be embracing that at the same time as developers to be creating it? It
is. But there's two aspects to that. So as you know, right? So I'm, believe it or not, a bit of a hippie, right? So I just wish I had the hair for it, and I wish I could grow a proper beard, right? Otherwise I'd be looking like a hippie as well. But most people don't know that, and obviously they think that's a bit unusual for property developers. But I'm really into this, looking after the environment. I'm really into nature. I'm really into design. I really want to create good housing and homes for people in the right way. So not the archetypal, horrible stuff that everyone quite rightly hates, right? So absolutely, like here now, right? So you know this place you've been involved in. We've been filming the building of it since the beginning, right? So the site was in the green belt, also an area of outstanding natural beauty in terms of the planning designation. But you've seen, and no doubt we can show some people's pictures of what was here in the past. Complicated site, covered in horrible old falling down buildings, was a real mess, but had a 35-year history of 8 planning refusals, right? Just because of its planning designation, i.e. green belt, even though it was not green, is not green, certainly not what most people would imagine green belt to be. It's not all beautiful forests and fields, right? Because I personally don't think that stuff should be, should be developed, right? So I'm a bit of a weird one because I'm a sort of hippie property developer, but also, I'm living in the real world and I'm commercial and I know what it takes to get deals done. So we've made this place super sustainable. There's an organisation called Building with Nature who I really like that look to support and encourage developers to keep and incorporate and build with nature, which is really important. There's new planning policy and legislation, relatively new, around biodiversity net gain, so increasing the nature value of places, all of which is really important. So I'm totally up for that and teaching people and encourage them to try to do things that way. But it's worth bearing in mind, it just is not always financially viable, because at the end of the day, right, property development, it really is hard work and high risk. Yeah, most developers actually go bust. Certainly the smaller ones. People don't really know about that. They just see the success stories and think we're all flying around in helicopters making fortunes, right? It's not like that for most of us, and the vast majority of property developers do go bust. So yes, we should be doing things in a super sustainable way and looking after nature, and I try to do that anywhere and everywhere I can. But people, and this is really important message to government as well, you've got to be focused and thinking about the financial viability of stuff, because in order to make it worth our while, because it's such a high risk business, we need to be properly incentivized and rewarded. To one, so that it makes it worth our while, but two, so we can literally survive and keep going and hopefully carry on building more houses. Yeah, and not everywhere, you can afford to do all the super sustainable stuff, because we've got land taxes, we've got affordable housing requirements. And remember, and I'm not saying we shouldn't provide that. I grew up in a council house, right? So I would be building 50% affordable housing everywhere if I could, and if it was financially viable. But the fact of the matter is, in a lot of places, particularly as build costs continue to increase, and particularly as funding has been cut for all sorts of things, including the provision of social housing, and certainly in lower value parts of the country, a lot of stuff just doesn't happen because it isn't financially viable to make it happen. And in actual fact, and there's a key thing that most people sort of miss as well, certainly people outside the industry, and it's not about greedy developers making tons of money and their profit margins. It's actually about land values and landowners' expectations. So every bit of land has got an existing use value. It's worth what it's worth today, as it is today. And in order to be, make it worth a landowner's while, they need to be incentivized, which usually means offering them over and above existing use value. So unless you're able to do that, just deals will not happen, landowners will not sell, and that's a problem, which comes back to my whole story to begin with, which is why the focus as a developer, what you really need to know and understand and get good at is adding maximum planning value. And if you want to be a really, really good one, you need to know how to do it in as sustainable way as possible, so you can also create good stuff that you end up being really proud of.
That's some great advice there. So on the other side of the coin, are there any mistakes that you would share with us that people could avoid, or that would be interesting to hear?
Wow. I mean, to be honest, I don't really know where to start, because like anyone, like you've been doing something a long time, you end up making a lot of mistakes. I've learned a lot now in hindsight, and I know a lot. Clearly, I will not be trying to borrow money from RBS again. You need to give them a very wide berth. So if you're borrowing money, you've got to be really, really careful who you get into bed with, because at the end of the day, lenders, investors, they've obviously got to protect their own businesses. Things start going a little bit weird, they will, some of them, pull the plug just like that. So you need to be really, and like in space in anything in life, really, you want to be careful who you deal with, who you jump into bed with, right? So it's not get rich quick. It's not easy. You've got to be partnering with the right people. You've got to be working with the right architects and planning consultants and other experts, because they're not all brilliant. Yeah. And even when you're lucky enough to find the really good ones, what you do need to know is, it's our job as the developer. We're basically the conductor of the orchestra. Yeah. So we need to see the bigger picture. We're the ones that take the risk. We're the ones that put our whatsits on the line. We need to know and understand how it all fits together, and manage and oversee the process. So I suppose one of the other, now it's interesting. So I've, coming back to the whole ADD thing and all the rest of it, and probably part of the story around my sort of upbringing and things like that, because I made up this whole story about being adopted and being on my own, and I couldn't rely on anyone and I couldn't trust anyone. That actually made me very, very driven. Yeah. But what it also made me do is learn a lot about all of the different aspects and everything you need to know in property development, right? Because it is very complex and there's a lot you need to know. And that was largely actually because I didn't really trust anyone. And I thought I couldn't rely on anyone, so I had to literally know everything about everything, right? Now, obviously, you can never know everything about everything, and trying to do everything on your own is very lonely, and it's hard work. So I suppose one of the big things I've learned is that you can't do everything on your own, and you do need to find and work with the right people. But I suppose it is really important making sure that that they are the right people,
Sure. Well, I think we've covered an amazing life so far. And the only thing you haven't told us about is your ecstatic dancing.
Yeah, obviously I'm not quite sure where you got that, but just that comes back to the hippie stuff. Yeah. So well, what that is, just in case you know. So basically, it's like, so I'm obviously of an age, where the whole acid house thing was sort of like big when I was younger. So what ecstatic dance is actually, it basically is like sober raving. So like you're dancing like a nutcase, dancing like you just don't care, without being out of your nut, and it's fun. So yeah, so that's one of my hobbies.
Fantastic. I never knew that. Sorry. Oh dear. Paul, thank you for sharing all of this with us. You are now free to go and dance.
Thanks for tuning in to Inside Property Development. Please remember to like and subscribe. Do join us every week, where we'll be speaking to house builders, developers, experts, planners, and everyone involved in trying to get more much needed housing created the right way. We'll learn together how we can collaborate rather than fight, and by working together we can all help create better places, spaces and homes, and a much more beautiful world.